lied and used fake documents to obtain the interview with my mother, made lurid and false claims about the royal family, which played on her fears and fueled paranoia.
Behind palace walls, one sharp decision flipped the entire royal mood overnight. What started as quiet money chatter suddenly turned serious for Prince Harry, and insiders say nobody inside the palace was ready for how fast it escalated. A move tied to Meghan reportedly pushed officials to pull the brakes, forcing Prince William to step in and lock things down with zero hesitation. This wasn't tabloid noise or messy rumors. Palace sources stress this was a clean legal call made to protect Princess Diana's estate exactly as it was designed. No drama, no emotions, just rules snapping into place. A rarely used clause hidden deep in the trust was activated, and once that happened, everything stopped cold. Before sunrise on January 17, 2026, senior figures at Clarence House quietly approved an immediate freeze on all trust distributions linked to the Duke of Sussex. No headlines, no leaks, just a silent decision with massive weight. What makes this moment stand out is that the clause had never been used before, not once. According to insiders, recent developments connected to Meghan raised unresolved legal questions tied to eligibility under the trust's original terms. This wasn't about gossip or public opinion. It was about definitions, paperwork, and strict conditions set decades ago. The palace didn't have wiggle room, and they knew it. A formal notice issued under the authority of Prince William made the message unmistakable. This move was labeled a safeguard, not a punishment. Still, in royal language, that's a heavy signal. Once the clause kicked in, no funds could move, no assumptions could be made, and no quiet fixes were allowed. Observers point out this clause doesn't care about image or headlines. It's cold, precise, and built for moments like this. Its only mission is to protect Diana's legacy until every question is cleared up. One legal switch turned a private issue into a full-scale royal reckoning. This freeze marks a rare flex of control inside the palace. Tradition and law collided fast, reshaping the situation overnight.
Was it like strategy time, or was it just like another day where we're going to figure it out, not an emergency situation?
It was very much, we all knew about it because we all read the papers, and
oh my gosh, how crazy. How crazy that you guys are back there reading them, and you know that like they're on the other side reading the same thing.
Yeah, well, not only on the other side, you have William and Harry come down in the kitchen in the morning, and you're thinking, oh, okay, you might want to read the paper. It was like that. That was the situation.
The vault is locked, the legacy is guarded, and the tension inside royal walls has never felt louder. How will the Duke react, and what truth might finally step out of the shadows? Prince Harry's inheritance from his mother has been blocked, and the reason isn't emotion or payback. Despite online noise, palace insiders say this move has nothing to do with punishment or family tension. The freeze wasn't personal, it was procedural, sharp, and rooted in old legal groundwork that had been sitting untouched for decades. At the center of this move is a quiet legal mechanism known as Clause 3, buried deep inside Princess Diana's sealed trust. This clause was never designed to judge behavior, manage headlines, or stir controversy. Its focus is far more basic and far more serious: legal clarity. Clause 3 exists to restrict access unless strict conditions written into the trust are fully satisfied. For years, palace lawyers viewed this clause as extreme backup, something filed away and unlikely to ever be needed. It wasn't active protection, it was an emergency brake. Decades passed, and the clause gathered dust, remembered more as caution than command. That changed the moment it was activated. By allowing Clause 3 to be enforced, Prince William effectively acknowledged that Diana's concerns weren't symbolic or emotional. They were deliberate, calculated, and legally precise. Royal records confirm that Diana personally demanded this clause be added in the mid-1990s, during a period when her trust in palace systems had weakened, but her attention to detail had sharpened. At the time, the clause was quietly labeled maternal foresight, not paranoia, not drama, just preparation. Few believed it would ever be triggered. No one expected a future where verification would be required before unlocking what was assumed to be guaranteed. Yet that exact scenario has now arrived.
I cannot imagine Harry hopping downstairs looking for his glass of morning OJ and you having to be like, that pep in your step, there's a, you know, it's about to expire once you see the papers today.
By triggering the clause, William turned a private safeguard into enforceable action. The trust doesn't accuse, speculate, or assign blame. It simply pauses everything. Funds stop moving, assumptions stop forming, and the process freezes until clarity is officially established. This freeze is not a punishment. It's a legal standstill. A controlled pause designed to protect the integrity of the trust exactly as Diana outlined it. Still, the impact is heavy. What was once a sealed protective measure is now a visible signal that unresolved questions can no longer be brushed aside. William chose certainty over sentiment and structure over silence. He allowed his mother's foresight to step into the open and operate as intended. Until verification is complete, the inheritance stays locked, guarded not by suspicion, but by a clause written decades ago to make sure truth, whenever it arrived, would matter. This moment proves that even inside royal walls, time doesn't erase unanswered questions, and legacies aren't just about money. They're about facing what history quietly leaves unresolved. The reveal of a specific clause in Princess Diana's will is what made the inheritance freeze possible, and suddenly, everything snapped into focus. So why would the royal family activate a clause like this, and how does the law even allow it? The answer sits squarely in English legal design. Under English law, Princess Diana had serious control over her estate after her death, and that power was no accident. This authority, known as testamentary freedom, gave Diana the legal right to decide who inherited her wealth, under what conditions, and on what timeline.
So we were with them when they would discover these stories, basically. But also, in fairness, if it was a big story, they'd be notified probably the night before. The press teams would let them know. And then, obviously, there would have to be a discussion with, the father about whatever that story may be and how to go forward. But the king, I think, and I was never in the room when these conversations took place because that really was a private conversation. But the king was, I think, of the belief that they were young and they're going to make silly mistakes, and you learn from those mistakes. It's as simple as that. I think
she could delay access, attach requirements, or even block distribution entirely if she felt it was necessary. In England and Wales, the law gives wide room for personal judgment, letting a will reflect its creator almost without interference. That freedom looks very different in other regions, but in England and Wales, a will carries the full weight of its maker's intent. For Diana, that meant her estate wasn't just money, it was a tool she could shape with precision. Every condition she added carried legal force and long-term impact. Because of this legal reality, Diana was fully within her rights to build safeguards into her trust. These weren't emotional reactions or symbolic gestures. They were lawful mechanisms designed to protect her intentions long after she was gone. The law allowed her to plan ahead, anticipate uncertainty, and slow things down if conditions weren't met. Clause 3 came straight out of that freedom. It didn't bend the law or test its limits. It fit cleanly within it. The clause was carefully written, fully valid, and grounded in Diana's legal authority. While some may see it as unusual, it wasn't improper or extreme. Many trusts include delays, checks, or requirements before inheritance moves forward. Diana's clause simply focused on certainty, something the law clearly allows. What makes Clause 3 stand out isn't legality, it's purpose. Diana understood that wealth can complicate lives instead of securing them. This clause wasn't meant to accuse or punish. It was designed to pause, create space, and demand clarity before access. And importantly, this wasn't pushed by advisors or lawyers behind closed doors. Clause 3 was Diana's call, start to finish. She didn't misuse her freedom. She handled it with precision.
And then I'd then go through and see him off, knowing he's off to go and do this thing that I've just watched in the news. And then you'd go and watch it later on, you'd see him doing what he's doing, and in the evening you would come back. So it was living in the most extraordinary world, very extraordinary, but great fun. And I remember being at Clarence House, looking out one morning and saw the cars, all the preset riders, everything as they all drive off, and you see this big entourage.
Every condition was chosen to protect, not provoke. In the end, Clause 3 wasn't extraordinary at all. It was the natural result of a woman using her legal rights carefully, thoughtfully, and with full awareness of the future she was shaping. But was the law the only force pushing this decision forward? Not even close. Another powerful element stepped out of the past, and it came straight from Diana herself. What finally moved the crown wasn't gossip, pressure, or noise. It was a handwritten letter, personal and unfiltered, written by Diana in the summer of 1996. The letter had been quietly preserved for decades by her former butler, Paul Burrell. During a deep review of royal inheritances, it resurfaced, and the impact was immediate. This wasn't Diana writing as a public figure. This was a mother speaking from instinct, not evidence. The tone of the letter was calm but uneasy. She spoke about protecting her sons, not from enemies, but from confusion, silence, and truths left hanging too long. She warned that charm can hide uncertainty and that silence over time can cause more damage than lies. Diana also described a moment that stuck with her during humanitarian travel. She recalled a brief encounter with a blind Tibetan mystic, short, quiet, but deeply unsettling. According to her writing, the mystic spoke of futures shaped by hidden divisions, weakened crowns, and truth arriving too late to stop harm. The warning wasn't dramatic or theatrical. It was soft, almost gentle, which made it harder to shake. Diana admitted she didn't fully understand the message at the time, but she felt compelled to write it down anyway. At the end of the letter, Diana included a short verse written in her own careful script. For years, it was brushed off as reflective poetry, symbolic words used to process fear and hope. No one thought it was meant to guide real-world decisions. That changed when legal experts took a closer look. They noticed that the verse closely mirrored the language later embedded in Clause 3, almost line for line. What once sounded poetic suddenly read like instruction. Each line pointed toward delay, verification, and the belief that truth sometimes needs protection before it can surface. The letter made one thing clear. Diana wasn't guessing, she was preparing. She understood that danger doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it moves quietly, wrapped in grace and good intentions. Her concern wasn't scandal. It was uncertainty passed forward unchecked. Once the letter was authenticated, the Crown could no longer treat Clause 3 as symbolic. Diana believed truth wouldn't reveal itself on its own. She believed it would stay hidden until someone forced it into the light. That moment has now arrived, turning a private letter into a silent force reshaping duty, legacy, and the meaning of inheritance itself. Could one quiet claim really be linked to what Diana feared most? In this fictional account, a single legal filing, timed perfectly, was enough to wake a clause that had slept for decades. The shock didn't come from a royal insider, a court figure, or the media. It came from an unexpected outsider, someone with no public profile and no history inside palace walls. The individual arrived calmly, without noise or demands. No press, no spectacle, just paperwork. In this narrative, the claim was presented with careful precision, backed by sworn statements and verified records prepared to survive legal scrutiny. The goal wasn't attention, it was clarity. What stood out most was what wasn't requested. No money, no status, no recognition, no inheritance. The filing focused narrowly on factual confirmation tied to records and history, nothing more. That restraint shifted how officials viewed the situation entirely. This fictional claimant spoke less about identity and more about certainty, about knowing origins, understanding records, and ensuring accuracy for long-term clarity. The tone was steady, controlled, and deliberate, leaving little room to dismiss the filing as reckless or opportunistic. The timing proved critical. The filing landed just as legal teams were already reviewing dormant safeguards inside long-standing trusts. That overlap changed everything. What had once been theoretical instantly became procedural. At that moment, silence was no longer an option. Clause 3, designed specifically to pause distributions when unresolved questions surface, could no longer remain inactive. Its role was never to accuse or conclude, only to slow the process and demand verification. The situation wasn't driven by scandal or emotion, it was driven by precision. One carefully documented claim, regardless of its final outcome, forced a system built on tradition to confront uncertainty head-on. Whether the claim would ultimately be confirmed or dismissed became secondary. What mattered was that truth, whatever it turned out to be, had been formally introduced into the process. And once that door opened, there was no returning to comfortable assumptions. That single moment made Clause 3 applicable not because of drama, but because the system was designed to respond when questions stopped being hypothetical. But will this claim face further verification, or is the palace acting on instinct alone? In this fictional account, investigators scrambled to piece together a timeline from scattered past records, and what emerged wasn't one shocking event, but a chain of quiet details that suddenly gained weight. At the center was a suggestion of a hidden personal history, an earlier engagement and a short private marriage in the mid-1990s. These events had existed only as whispers before, now treated as records worth careful review. What made the story tense wasn't romance, scandal, or drama. It was the precision of timing and documentation. Investigators uncovered references to a sealed annulment request lodged decades ago. The documents hinted at historical details that, if verified in this narrative, carried serious procedural weight. Archivists began reviewing the records not for gossip, but for clarity, accuracy, and compliance with legal standards. Every step left a documented trail. The focus wasn't morality or judgment, it was process. Royal systems rely on full disclosure during vetting, approvals, and formal procedures. Omissions, even accidental, can disrupt institutions. In this fictional reconstruction, silence can be as consequential as error. The goal was completeness, ensuring that all relevant history was visible to decision makers. Once the gaps were noticed, they demanded attention. Investigators paused, they didn't accuse. They treated history as something to verify, not something to punish. The narrative stressed that even long-buried records can resurface when systems built for certainty encounter unanswered questions. The implications spread fast. Questions extended from past events into present processes, touching the foundations of legality, procedure, and institutional clarity. What had never been checked before became critical. Verification wasn't about scandal. It was about certainty, ensuring that every detail aligned with the rules of process. In the story, this sequence made the activation of Clause 3 understandable. It wasn't drama, revenge, or spectacle. It was law and procedure responding to uncertainty. Once the questions were formally posed, the system could no longer ignore them. The fictional investigation illustrated how even quiet, forgotten history can shape decisions, enforce safeguards, and demand transparency when the stakes are high. But what consequences could this clause bring, and who would feel the impact first? In this fictional account, the monarchy entered what insiders quietly called a legacy lockdown, a meticulous effort to control exposure, safeguard succession, and reinforce protocol. Every move inside the palace was precise, measured, and deliberate. Prince William ordered the suspension of all references, projects, and financial assets linked to the Sussex branch, quietly but firmly cutting ties. Princess Anne froze charitable engagements that previously involved the couple, leaving no formal or informal connections active. Princess Catherine took a posture of careful discretion, letting silence speak louder than any announcement. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, the network surrounding the fictional figure began to shift. Collaborations paused, allies withdrew, and projects that had been in motion stalled without explanation. Platforms delayed releases, initiatives slowed, and what once seemed bold independence started to feel like quiet isolation. Silence that had been protective began to show cracks. Without proactive communication or reconciliation, space opened for speculation and uncertainty. Across both worlds, the monarchy and Hollywood, doors began to close, not with drama, but with quiet, deliberate finality. Influence without participation started to fade, and visibility without access showed its limits. The convergence of disciplined containment inside the palace and subtle withdrawal in Hollywood created an unspoken truth. When systems tighten, connections fray, and silence dominates, consequences emerge on their own. The contrast was stark. One empire fortified by tradition, the other a world of visibility slowly withdrawing. In this fictional scenario, the future wasn't shaped by statements or headlines, but by the quiet weight of doors left closed. Assets were suspended, references paused, charitable ties frozen, and projects halted, all as part of a strategic, behind-the-scenes response. The question remained, how would the other key figures respond? Could anyone step in to guide or stabilize the situation as these pressures played out? Now let's examine Harry's choices and a rare royal decree, a true reckoning. By January 18th, the crisis had reached its emotional and institutional peak, marking a turning point in royal history. Prince Harry left Montecito with quiet resolve, moving without entourage or spectacle, carrying only legal papers, correspondence, and the final will of his mother, Princess Diana. Those documents held decades of legacy, love, and expectations, threads that now demanded resolution inside Buckingham Palace. The palace air was heavy with tension as extraordinary measures unfolded. King Charles drew on seldom-used powers to activate dormant provisions designed to pause recognition of any disputed or uncertain claims. These mechanisms, centuries old, were rarely called upon, but now they were unavoidable. Palace officials moved with precision. Archives consulted, letters verified, protocols followed. Every step was calculated to protect tradition and continuity. Amid this controlled storm, Diana's longtime confidant, Paul Burrell, delivered the final sealed letter from the princess herself. In her careful words, Diana had foreseen the moment her youngest son would face the pull of love versus the weight of legacy. Her guidance, written decades earlier, had shifted from theoretical to urgent reality. That evening, the world watched as King Charles addressed the nation. His tone was sober, measured, and stripped of sensationalism. No scandal, no gossip, only stewardship, responsibility, and clarity. No inheritance without verification. No restoration without certainty, he declared. The brief speech carried the weight of centuries, reminding all that the monarchy survives not by personal desire, but through law, tradition, and careful management of lineage. As palace lights dimmed, one phrase echoed quietly through the halls. Sometimes, to protect the crown, you must let go of the prince. It was not judgment, but acknowledgement of the hard truths that come with duty. The story of seamless inheritance ended, not with spectacle, but with careful, deliberate verification. Family legacies and succession lines would now face a new lens of scrutiny. The monarchy's survival relied on clarity, truth, and structure. For Prince Harry, the path forward was uncertain, and the stakes were immense. History, law, and duty now defined the narrative, leaving no shortcuts or easy solutions. The reckoning had begun. The question remained, could frozen inheritance and the systems built to enforce it survive this storm? And could those involved navigate the challenge without further upheaval? The palace, tradition, and law were in control, and nothing else would shape the outcome. If you watch this and have thoughts, drop them in the comments below. If this breakdown made you see things differently, hit subscribe and stay locked in for more deep dives like this. Don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who needs to see it.